Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are unpacking H.R. 1, a single piece of legislation that, get this, simultaneously alters your taxes, your healthcare, border security, and even our energy policy. I mean, how can one bill do so much? Let's find out.
It sounds kind of impossible, right? I mean, how can just one law manage to overhaul so many different huge parts of our society all at once? Well, the answer isn't really in the specific policies themselves, but in the powerful and, let's be honest, pretty controversial process that was used to pass it.
You see, H.R. 1 is what's known as a reconciliation bill. Just think of it like a legislative express lane. It's this special process that lets lawmakers package a whole bunch of major and sometimes totally unrelated policy changes together, all into one big act, so it can pass with just a simple majority.
Okay, so keeping that special process in mind, let's actually look at what's inside this massive bill. First up, let's talk about the changes that could directly affect your wallet.
So one of the bill's big economic goals is to really fuel investment in small, growing companies. And it does this by sweetening the deal for investors through a really key change in the tax code.
And as you can see right here, the change is pretty significant. Before this bill, investors had to hold stock on a small business for 5 years to get a major tax break. H.R. 1 slashes that waiting period down to just 3 years. The whole goal is to get that investment capital flowing much faster. And the financial tweaks don't stop with investing. The bill also gets into everyday costs, like creating a new tax deduction for interest on car loans. And it tackles the burden of student debt from 2 different directions. First, by providing tax relief if a loan is forgiven, and second, by encouraging employers to help their workers pay down those loans.
All right, next up, the bill makes some really fundamental changes to federal health and nutrition programs. And these are programs that, affect the daily lives of millions of Americans.
And this table here illustrates one of those shifts perfectly. For the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or what most of us know as SNAP, the law moves away from a really complex calculation. Instead, it sets up these new fixed ratios for figuring out benefit amounts, and it's all based on the standard for a 4-person household.
Now, this next point is absolutely crucial. For the very first time, in some states, H.R. 1 directly links Medicaid health coverage to work or other community activities for certain adults. This is a major policy shift.
So here's the breakdown of how it works. First, there's a requirement, 80 hours per month of what's called community engagement. That can include things like work, job training, or community service. Now, there are key exemptions for folks who are pregnant, disabled, under 19, or caring for a young child. But, and this is the big one, for those who have to comply and don't, the consequence is serious. They could have their Medicaid eligibility suspended.
So we've gone from social programs to national security. The bill now completely shifts its focus to the nation's borders. And it does this by directing a massive infusion of funding and new policy directives right at Homeland Security.
The legislation puts a lot of new resources towards several key areas. We're talking about border infrastructure and the wall system, a boost in personnel and facilities for customs and border protection, an expansion of detention capacity, and new border security and screening technology. It also adds new rules for vetting potential sponsors for unaccompanied minors.
And just to give you a sense of the scale here, it's immense. Look at this number. That's a single appropriation of $10 billion, all directed to the Department of Homeland Security for these efforts.
And the bill itself puts it this way, stating the funding is for reimbursement of costs incurred in undertaking activities in support of the Department of Homeland Security's mission to safeguard the borders of the United States. So it's framed as support for the department's core mission. And finally, H.R. 1 introduces a really complex, and you could even say sometimes contradictory, set of changes to the nation's energy and environmental policy. And this affects both public lands and the green energy sector.
One of the most direct changes has to do with how federal lands are managed. Specifically, the legislation mandates a new, aggressive year-over-year increase in timber sales coming from our national forests.
And as this chart shows, the numbers are pretty stark. The law actually mandates that the annual timber sale quantity has to be 250 million board feet greater than the total from the year before. And this isn't a one-time jump. It's a required increase every single year, all the way through 2034.
Then, for the green energy sector, the bill phases in stricter rules about where components can come from. As this timeline shows, it steadily increases the required domestic content percentage over the next several years, with the threshold eventually settling at 60%.
And that's not all. The legislation also creates new fees for renewable energy projects on public land, while at the same time it streamlines the approvals for offshore oil and gas production. And it even creates new definitions for what counts as qualifying income for certain energy partnerships.
So when you take a step back, you've got taxes, benefits, borders, and energy, all of it completely reshaped in one single piece of legislation. It really just shows the sheer breadth of this bill, and it demonstrates how that reconciliation process can be used to enact these massive, sweeping changes across the government.
And that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. When a single bill contains the blueprint for so many fundamental changes all at once, well, how does that reshape the role and the reach of government itself?